Hey, Dave Walker here, co-founder and CEO of the B to SMB Institute, another in our Small Biz Aid Playbook sessions. Very excited to welcome Catherine Pertelli of Kabbage to a session here. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for doing this. I sincerely appreciate it. Hey, I was reflecting before this interview. I'm not sure I've actually ever heard the origin story of Kabbage. And as a co-founder, I imagine you would know what that was. Could you kind of share with us how Kabbage came to be?
I'd be happy to. It's a lot of people are surprised by this fact on the one hand. On the other hand, people who've known this story for a long time still think all we do is the first thing we did. So we got our start in 2008. Rob Frohwein, my co-founder, gave me a call and said, hey, I have this idea for how we could use an eBay API that they launched in 2007 to give eBay businesses access to a line of credit. So the whole impetus for Kabbage was inspired by an API. So I thought, he called me, and I had been in consumer lending and fintech for a long time, and well, not that long because I'm not that old. But he said, I said, that's a great idea. Consumer lending has been automated for 20 years. Why wouldn't you automate small business lending? And so we actually automated the very first loan on the Kabbage platform in 2010 in our beta period, and it was to eBay businesses. So we worked with e-commerce businesses until 2014 or so when we expanded into brick and mortar, and it was really because of the proliferation of APIs that we were able to move outside of e-commerce. So that's really how we got started. The name Kabbage, people often want to know where that came from. And if you Google Kabbage with a C, you will see two definitions. One of them is a cruciferous vegetable. The other one is money. It's a Depression era euphemism for cash.
Yeah. I did know that part of the story, and Kabbage with a K, because I'm sure you didn't want to be confused with the vegetable. So
that's correct.
Got it. And what was your background before you got the phone call to start up this wonderful business? And when was that, by the way? When did Kabbage start? What year?
Rob and I sat at a Starbucks in November of 2008 and sketched out what it might look like. And so we just kept doing it, and it just happened. That was our full-time job after a while.
That's terrific. And what was your background before Kabbage?
It would have been considered fintech, even though that wasn't a word that was used back then, but everything from consumer credit reporting. I started a company that was effectively what Credit Karma is now, back in 2009, helping credit card companies automate their online application processes in the 90s, and stayed with fintech until this morning when I woke up. Wow.
Okay, cool. So I like to ask this question to kind of kick off each of these sessions, and that's kind of the where were you when question. So probably sometime in February and March, when you personally kind of recognized, wow, this is getting serious. Do you remember that moment? Was it a single moment?
Well, but I remember this moment, and this would have been probably in early February, maybe to mid-February, when I saw a video of a hospital being built in 8 days in China. And that's when I was like, holy shit, this is kind of a big thing. And there's no way that this couldn't spread. Like, this has to be something that's going to hit us eventually. I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not doing more at that moment. For some reason, it was like we were all moving in slow motion, just stuck in quicksand, because nobody else was doing anything. The government wasn't doing anything. Nobody seemed to be anxious about it, but we're all like, this seems bad. So that was the one moment for me. But then the other one was in the second week of March. We were testing what it would be like for our staff to work from home. We did half of the folks on Wednesday of that week. That was the 11th. And we were going to test everybody on the 13th of March, which happened to be Friday the 13th. I recently learned that. I hadn't thought about it at the time. And after Friday the 13th, no one came back to the office. And that's when we were like, the wheels are stopping. Everything is grinding to a halt. We got to figure this out.
That's wild. And I remember, again, it very early on getting a message from your head of sales, Pete Steger, and just of, hey, how are you doing? But then second, kind of like, what are you thinking? Where is this going? And that probably was around mid-March. So, during that time, I'm sure you are also hearing from your small business customers. What are some of the things that the SMBs are saying to you and your representatives in those first couple of weeks of March?
Well, what we noticed the following week was what you might refer to as a run on the bank. Everybody was so nervous and they all wanted to have capital and everyone was drawing down on their lines of credit. And it reminded me of what was the situation that was happening reminded me of a hurricane or some other, disaster, natural disaster. And usually when that happens, someone like FEMA steps in with the SBA to serve small businesses. This has happened for us many, many times over the years with hurricanes in particular. And even with the fires in California, where federal agencies step in to provide relief. I mean, we're not really set up to do that. And
Right.
so the questions from our customers is like, how much money can I take? And like, do you think I should do this? I don't know what to do. Is there going to be something else for us? Is there going to be federal aid? The customers were asking us that like crazy.
And in those early conversations, particularly that kind of run on the bank, did you fulfill many of those loans, or were you kind of like, were you yourselves, were you cautious on, okay, this is what our customers are asking, but there's a certain degree of leverage that we have to, kind of stay within the bounds of?
And we dispersed a lot of capital for a couple of days, and then we thought we really need to slow this down, and we did slow it down because, again, we just aren't in the position. If you think about the total number of dollars that fintech provided to small businesses in 2019, it's like $10 billion. And you think about the amount of money that's been deployed under PPP is, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. So if fintech just wasn't equipped to provide support to all these businesses.
Right, certainly. So in the midst of all this, I'm sure there are conversations going on around the executive committee table, and you guys are not just thinking about the products and services that you would naturally offer to your small business customers, but you guys really very early on started thinking about the kind of assistance that you could help small business with. Tell me what those conversations were like and what were some of the key ideas that really got floated around the table.
Well, our head of policy, Sam Taussig, who is just a miracle worker and wonderkind, he said to us, hey, I think there's going to be a thing. I think there's going to be some sort of federal aid. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to be dispersed. I don't know how we can participate. But he had his finger on the pulse. So we were watching that from the very beginning. And then we just were like, well, we have some tools. How can we deploy them? So merchant acceptance or credit card processing is something that we offer to our customers so they can accept credit cards. So we had that. We were working on a business checking account, but it wasn't quite ready yet. We were thinking, what could we bring to bear to help businesses, whether it's businesses who weren't used to accepting payments online, and now like a restaurant that now has to accept payments online and they need the ability to do that, or whatever the businesses may be. Rob actually was noticing that a restaurant that he and his wife loved was telling their customers, hey, buy gift cards right now. And then you can use them whenever you want to, but we could use the money. And so he was like, oh, what if we used our platform to help small businesses sell gift cards to their customers? Because a lot of businesses don't actually have a gift card program. It's not just restaurants and retailers. It's also electricians and plumbers and roofers and all the people that, we work with all the time as consumers, where we have a favorite business that we can help. So, I think the idea was, how can we get more money into more businesses' hands now to help them weather this storm?
And so that was the first big idea, and it was funny because I remember getting an email from Pete again that said, hey, we've got this program really to encourage consumers to buy gift cards. And I had a very similar experience to Rob. I was in our corner sports bar that in our neighborhood, and they were just this was before really the lockdown here in Illinois, and they were trying to figure out ways to do things. And the wife of the owners came to our table and basically said, hey, would you guys like to buy a discounted gift card? And very similar experience, and thought, wow, that's a really great idea. Same day, got an email from Pete that was basically describing the gift card offering. He said, that's really smart. That's a really great thing for your platform to do. So then tell me, how did HelpSmallBusiness.com get born?
So that is how it was born. And we thought, how can we do this? How can we issue gift cards to consumers and, credit back the businesses? So our team, literally our technology team, built that over a weekend. and we used our payment processing platform to allow businesses to accept payments. If they signed up with our payment processing, which is easy for them to do, they could do it in 5 minutes, just like our lending products or any other things we've ever offered. They could sign up in 5 minutes, accept cards through Kabbage, and their customers, they could send to a specific link for them so that their customers could buy gift cards. And those gift cards were issued digitally, and they could be redeemed at any time.
Wow, that's really cool. And so what was the early adoption like? What were some of the first indicators? Wow, we're really onto something here.
Well, we were watching two metrics. We were watching the transactions that were happening, the gift cards that were being purchased, but also the number of merchants that were coming to be onboarded. And so, we went from, onboarding very few merchants because it was a new product for us in the first place, the merchant processing piece, to, hundreds of merchants in a day. So you could see the spike. And a lot of it was due to partnerships with folks like Facebook and with you who were sending customers our way. So it was an exciting time, but I think it really bridged a period between when the period of uncertainty when nothing was happening for small businesses and when the PPP started to run. So I feel like that's when we saw most of the traction.
And then just not as a side bear, certainly, because it was a real thrust of what you guys were doing, you kind of positioned the business to really process PPP loans, correct? I mean, you guys really dove into that as an assist for small businesses. Is that correct?
That's correct. Although nobody knew what a PPP was in March, of course, because it hadn't been born yet.
Right. And what were some of the challenges that you had to face with really kind of onboarding of the whole PPP processing?
Gosh, there were so many. I think the hardest thing was the uncertainty and the volatility of rulemaking around the program. We learned about something called an interim final rule. Who knew that was a thing? So that was part of them determining how the program would work. And then we discovered that fintechs were going to be eligible to participate as lenders in the program once they completed the application program. And then we learned that we'd be able to get access to capital from the PPPLF so that we could actually continue to make more loans and wouldn't have to use our balance sheet. So then there were the rules about what kind of documentation can be used and what is forgiveness going to look like. And all of these things continue to change. Meanwhile, at the same time, when the program launched, we weren't a lender yet. So we were partnering with banks, two specific banks, to help originate loans for them because we were able to automate the process, even though we'd never seen the tax forms before that we were accepting for small businesses, things like a W-3 and a 940 and a 1040C. I never heard of those documents before either, quite frankly. And so we had to figure out, we built a system, like one dude basically wrote a script overnight that did it, but over a couple of weeks, we built a platform that could automate the ingestion and classification and calculation of information in these documents so that we wound up automating more than 80% of the 300,000 folks we served through the PPP.
300,000 served via Kabbage? Wow.
That's
a breathtaking number.
It made us the second largest PPP lender after Bank of America in the country by transaction volume.
Wow, that's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. So the evolution of your outreach to small business, not just the PPP loans, obviously, but really kind of your consistent, you guys have always had a very customer-centric focus. And obviously HelpSmallBusiness.com was just one of many kind of manifestations of how you guys try to serve small business customers. What would you say are some of the top things that you and the Kabbage team have learned about small business as this crisis has really unfolded and evolved? What are some of the things that you would say are consistent insights?
Okay, number one, I would say they're so creative. Small business owners have figured out how to continue to operate their businesses, how to move into some new area. I mean, this is a silly example, but you go to a restaurant now, which in Georgia you can go to restaurants because we let people go to bowling alleys in May. But you can go into a restaurant and you can scan a QR code and see your menu. Like, that's super cool. Not only does it protect the workers at the restaurant, but it protects the people who are dining there. It is, frankly, just easier and cooler and a better experience anyway. So the rapid adoption of that kind of thing, it was really interesting, I think, in the restaurant business. The ability to place orders online, folks who were taking all their inventory and putting it online and figuring out how to use Shopify and how to sell their stuff on Amazon. I think all of these things were really interesting. I love this story about my dentist. Who would have thought that there'd be like innovation in dentistry during the pandemic? But I asked, I know, it's funny. So I asked him how business was doing. I've been doing this Invisalign thing. And he said, actually, business is great. We took a month off and it gave me time to think about what I really wanted my business to be like. Who did I want to be serving and how did I want to spend my time? And what did growth look like for me? And he said, I'm actually doing better now than ever because I took that time to focus my efforts and to figure out the kind of work I want to be doing and to stop doing work that I don't want to do. And I was like, that's amazing. I just loved that that was his story. And I think you're seeing that kind of innovation across the board all around the country.
And how about the challenges that came with those very creative pivots that small businesses that they've been going through? What are some of the things that you're seeing are emergent challenges for those small businesses who are, clearly doing their very, very best to survive and doing, like your dentist, doing a pretty darn good job of doing that?
I mean, some businesses are having a harder time than others. Some businesses are going to be harder hurt. If you are a service provider, for example, to anything related to the travel industry, if you have an establishment that thrives on people who go to work in an office building and who potentially take public transit to get there, and they stop at the dry cleaners or to get their nails done or at a bodega or at a restaurant, those businesses are having a hard time because those workers aren't working in those buildings. And so I think there are some areas that are more permanently impacted, but I'll use the example of the caterer at our office, who we're not catering lunches in our office right now because nobody's there. But he is using his dark kitchen to deliver food to people, a ghost kitchen, sorry, is the term, to deliver food to people for meals. He's working, wants to build a totally new business around New York pizza for, a hot delivery to folks who are near the kitchen. So I think, there are lots of ways that people are figuring out these people still need to eat. They're just not going into the office.
Right. So if you're, and those are great, all great stories. How are you prognosticating, not to put you on the spot, but what does your crystal ball say about small businesses, through the end of the year into 2021? How are you feeling as somebody who's intimately understands kind of the health of small business across the country?
Well, it's hard to answer that question broadly because it really does depend on the industry. When we were processing PPP loans, and this is going to be a longer answer probably than you're expecting. I wound up talking to a lot of customers on the phone. And I talked to this one customer in California who does home renovations. And I said, oh, I guess things are really tight right now. And he said, no, everybody's trapped in their homes when they all want to redo their kitchens. So there are some industries that are doing really, really well because of this pandemic and because people are working from home. Like if you make webcams, you're sold out because everybody's ordering webcams because they're working from home. So there are some places that are doing great. And there are some, obviously, that aren't doing so well. So on those industries that are doing well, I think they're going to continue to ride that wave. And they need to be careful to manage their growth in their business, recognizing that at some point, things are going to go back to normal and all the kitchens are going to be redone and all the webcams are going to be bought. So understanding how to manage that, wind down, I guess, a little bit from the fervor. And then for the businesses that have been struggling, that haven't been able to generate the same kind of revenue, that have had to lay off workers, that are concerned about their future. What I would say is that the entrepreneurial spirit in the U.S. is very strong, always has been. There is this concept of an American dream that everybody is striving for, and no one works harder for it than small businesses. And what's great for small businesses now is the advent of all of these digital products to help them manage their business, to manage their cash flow, and they're learning more and more how to embrace them. Traditional institutions are trying to provide more digital solutions, as are all of the other folks that are serving them. And so I think in that way, small businesses have access to even better tools than they ever did. And the more they can embrace those, whether it's starting, now with their existing business or a new business if they start in March of next year because they, learned something from the last business and they want to do it again because, again, everybody wants to be their own boss and everybody wants to pursue that dream.
That's good. That's optimistic. Frankly, more optimistic than I thought you might be. But I do think that there's a sense amongst many of our peers that what the last 6 months have done is effectively compress a lot of evolution that small businesses were on the path to go through, but really more like over a 10-year period, not in a 6-month period. But that adoption of a real digital presence, that adoption of frankly tighter operational controls, particularly of their money, that understanding and relationship that frankly is more direct and more honest with their consumers, with their small business consumers. Those are all really great things. And so hopefully if they get their offering right, if their product is right and befitting the times, they've got far much more backing them up to be successful than they really ever had before. And that's, I think, what I think all of us can be bullish about. Are you hopeful, not to put you on the spot again, but are you hopeful that there will be another round of PPP loans?
I am, and there's two different ways that could go. One of them could be allowing folks who already borrowed once to borrow a second time, because I think we all agree that the impact is longer than the 10 weeks that was originally provided with the first PPP. And the other is opening it up to new businesses. We've seen already that the Main Street program has not been well adopted, which is, for much larger businesses. So taking that capital and pushing it back out. The question is, there wasn't a ton of demand at the end of the last PPP, and we don't know if that's because people weren't sure if it was for them, if people didn't know about it, if they didn't know how to apply, if they didn't have the right documents there. I think a lot of education needs to be provided to small businesses if we want to extend that program to new businesses. Again, I just think that's something that's really important. A lot of people were skeptical about the program, and they were worried, what is forgiveness going to be like? And I think if all those rules were set in advance, people might feel more comfortable borrowing. Nobody wants to be saddled with a 5-year loan if they don't expect that.
Right. I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think it was really the forgiveness piece that probably, pulled a lot of, pens back from the dotted line. No, I don't want to go on the hook for this because I'm not sure whether or not I will be able to successfully pay it back. So this has been terrific. And I want to kind of wrap up by just asking you, you're speaking to hundreds of your brethren in the business to small business space. And you guys have obviously very successfully navigated how to help small businesses. What are your 2 or 3 pieces of advice for B to SMB brands out there in the form of the help that they offer small business really going forward into 2021? What would you have them concentrate on?
What we realized, I think, probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at Kabbage, when we started building this cash flow suite of products, was that we think our customers borrowed too much and they spent too much in fees and they kept the money for too long. And we're like, we really need to help our customers figure out a better way to more efficiently manage capital. And so one of our investors said, well, doesn't that mean you're going to generate fewer dollars in fees? And we're like, yeah, it does. But you can never do something that's good for your customer that's bad for you. And so I think playing in the long game and understanding, do you want to have a relationship with that customer, or do you just want to make money one time? And if you have a relationship with them, then you're going to generate more revenue in the long run anyway, because you're going to have a loyal customer base. And I think not operating in the immediate short-term view is one of the number one things you can do, because it's frankly best for small businesses, which is best for our economy, which is best for jobs. And so it's more than just, what do I need right now? I think we all have to take a longer view for sure. And then I think the other thing I would say is thinking about what the customer experience is. How can you save your customers the most time? And how can you give them the experience that they want? How can you make it digital? How can you make it fast? How can you make it simple? Small business owners are wearing a million hats. If you're in a restaurant, you are cooking the food and you're taking the money and you're ordering the supplies and you're the CFO of your business, and you probably didn't have a degree in finance. So, I know I didn't. So I feel like that's something that's important to remember about our customers, is that they have to do all the jobs and they don't have PhDs in any of them, other than the one trade that they love and they're really, really good at. So help us spend more time doing that.
Those are 2 terrific pieces of advice, and I hope everybody listens, because I think they do serve small business first, which helps all of us. Listen, thank you very, very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I know our audience has learned a lot. We all look up to you guys as being really exemplary as a brand, as an enterprise, as a culture. And thanks for sharing so much today. I really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.